Local programming on KRWG Public Media made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
This is KRWG Public Media, TV, radio, online. News that matters. Now, across the Mesilla Valley and the borderland, the stories that shape our community. From the KRWG Broadcast Center at New Mexico State University, this is Newsmakers.
Thank you for joining us for Newsmakers. I'm Casey Counts. KRWG Public Media is saying goodbye to content director Anthony Moreno. Anthony has been a multimedia journalist, anchor, and news director during his tenure at KRWG and leaves a legacy of passion for local voices, dedication to the mission of KRWG, and mentoring young journalists along the way. While we're sad to see Anthony go, we wish him great success in the future and are grateful to have this conversation with Anthony here on Newsmakers. Thank you for being with us, Anthony.
Thank you for having me here, Casey. I'm excited to share a little bit about my experience here at KRWG.
Well, first, how does it feel to be on that chair?
It's a little different, but I gotta tell you, it is kind of comfortable.
Good, I'm glad you're comfortable. I'd like to start kind of here at the end of your time at KRWG and what it's been like for you the last few years serving as content director.
Well, it certainly has been, it was a change at the time. It's been a wonderful experience because you switch from going to just focusing on your reporting, your hosting duties to worrying about everybody else's responsibilities and trying to work with them to ensure they reach their goals.
I mean, having to be responsible for me alone must have been a great challenge. So.
No, that was easy. That was probably the easiest part, trust me.
Let's talk about the roles that you've served in before you were elevated to content director. How did your career at KRWG begin?
It began as a morning edition host, which many people may be familiar. I did that role for nearly 10 years. It was a lot of fun. Very exciting and different hours than everybody else on the planet. When you're going through it, you feel like you're just the only person, you know, waking up in the morning and going through your day and getting off work when everybody's coming back from lunch. And so that was quite a change for me.
Yeah, and you know, one of those things that you mentioned, kind of being alone, feeling like you're on a bit of an island maybe when you're behind the microphone in a studio, it's not even light out yet, and you don't see your audience. So when you get out into the community and you're able to meet the people who are listening to you, tell me about what that experience is like.
I think that's been one of the most fun parts about serving in that role, and my role currently is just having the opportunity to engage the community, go to the communities that are listening to us, and also learning about the issues they're dealing with on a daily basis. I think it's really important that we do that work. But the positive feedback that I've gotten from so many people is just a reinforcement of what we do here at KRWG. People share how much KRWG means to them, and you get a better understanding when you're there in their community meeting with them.
Let's talk a little bit about how you chose journalism as a career.
Yeah, that probably goes back to high school. I wasn't set on it, but it's when journalism first came on my radar. It was probably 11th grade, and there was an incident at high school that the students felt they were being treated unfairly. And so all the students in the 11th and 12th grade protested, and we had a sit-in. And the issue was that there was a missing walkie-talkie from one of the officials on campus. And the administration at the time had went on the intercom and said, we just want the walkie-talkie back. Whoever finds it, there won't be any repercussions. Well, the person who found it turned in the walkie-talkie, and that person was placed in suspension. And so they basically lied to us. And so the students banded together, they had a sit-in, and the administration reacted very different towards us. It was more of a enforcement method to where they were threatening all of us with detention, suspensions if we didn't leave. And we didn't leave. So somebody called the local news. And as soon as the administration heard that a local news team was on the way to report on this, the administration's tone changed completely to hey guys, we just want you to, let you know that we're willing to work with you. Everything's going to be okay. We just want the walkie-talkie back. That was the words they were using. Their language changed completely after they found out the local news team was on the way. And that's when journalism kind of came on my radar.
And is that what you went into college to study from the start?
Not originally, no. I was really into sports at the time, and so I was really interested in possibly being on ESPN, sports journalism, and I did that in college. We followed around the football team. We had a program very similar to Aggie Vision here at NMSU, and produced the local games. And I did that for a year, and it was fun, a lot of fun, and you learn a lot about broadcasting and the high pressure that comes along with it. But I found it to be just maybe not my calling, and that's when I had a professor who introduced me to the local NPR member station on campus, and I went over there and talked with them and ended up with an internship and been with public media pretty much ever since.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that professor, maybe an inspiration to you, maybe a mentor. Who were some of your greatest mentors and inspirations along the way?
Sure, that professor, his name was Vic Miller, and he was a professor at Pittsburgh State University where I attended college. And he is somebody that kind of been there, done that in broadcasting, worked at very high levels, a lot of different programs, interviewed well-known people around the world, and getting his validation that I could do this as a career was just enough for me to move forward. Along the way in my professional experience, I would say a mentor, of course, would be somebody who I met here when I came in, and that's Edmundo Resendez, who was my very first supervisor at KRWG Public Media, and almost like a big brother in broadcasting for me. And he had a lot of experiences around the country, and so that was great to learn from him. And of course, Dr. Fred Martino, who I worked with for many years, and our conversations on journalism just opened up a new world for me. So that's been, people as far as like this profession that really helped me with journalism and understanding what might be possible with this career, and just how to do it in a way that's right and is the public media way.
Do you remember your first time on the air?
Oh my goodness.
That's always a good story.
Yeah. So I was doing an internship at an NPR member station in Southeast Kansas, and the program manager came up to me and said, "Hey, do you want to host classical music?" I knew nothing about classical music. So he gave me a book, Classical Music for Dummies, and said, "You're on in 20. And so for that next hour, it seemed to be the longest hour of my life, as I mispronounced every composer's name and a lot of different songs. And I heard from all the classical music listeners from around the entire area. Oh my goodness. But I actually, they were very supportive in the end. And I feel like I got pretty good at it as the year continued, and actually learned a lot about classical music and made a lot of good friends who are performers in classical music along the way. So it opened up a whole new world for me. Before that, I was really just listening to hip hop and R&B. And so it was just an experience that just broadened my horizons.
Well, tell me about your decision to come to Las Cruces.
Well, my decision to come to Las Cruces was something that aligned with what I was hoping for. I wanted to move somewhere that was warmer. I'm originally from Kansas City, Missouri. I lived in Missouri and Kansas for pretty much my entire life before this move. And so finding a warmer climate was something that I definitely was looking for. I had spent some pretty miserable winters falling down on ice, and I was getting tired of scraping my windshield before I took off for the day. And so having that opportunity to move to a warmer climate, and also the culture, experience a brand new culture that was completely different than that of the Midwest. So the borderland was definitely something that was just very intriguing to me.
What did you know about this area before you came?
Well, obviously the border, I was paying attention to what was happening on the news, but if you live in different parts of the country, the way they explain the border is completely different than what it really is. First of all, border communities get left out a lot of the national dialogue. When you see national news helicopter in and set up in front of the border wall, It's just a lot of it is really focused on border security or immigration, but they tend to not cover border communities and the issues that are really important in them, highlighting the folks in those communities that are doing amazing things. You know, this is a very beautiful place. I don't have to tell that to our audience. They know that. And it's very unique. But one thing I did learn is just the ripple effect that happens in our border communities when there is a change in policy at the federal level. And that's something that really interested me when I was moving here.
Now tell me about, because you came here without any family, you didn't have any ties really to this area, right? And so once you got here, you kind of had to find community. What was that process like?
It was very tough. I spent much of my first year not really making friends, but I did find a community. Of course, here at KRWG Public Media, there were folks here on staff that were always inviting me over to cookouts and things like that. And also people in the building. As a morning edition host, I was getting to work at 5 in the morning, and so I became friends with the custodians of the building. And they were kind of my first friends here. They would invite me to events, family events and things like that. There was one time when I got in a bicycle accident. I was riding to work and I couldn't ride my bike anymore because I had a broken toe. And the custodians would actually pick me up in the morning and drive me to work while I was dealing with that.
I considered asking you about that incident because when we were talking about coming to work when nobody else is here and it's dark out, that's what I thought of because I was familiar with that story. And I thought, oh, in my head, Anthony should tell that story about the bicycle crash. So I'm glad it came up. So you've got to just fill in the blanks there about what happened and how you got taken care of that morning.
It was probably 2014, I believe, when the accident happened. And I had rode my bike to work for a while. I didn't live far away. And it was so peaceful in the morning coming to work because there's no traffic at 4:30 in the morning. And I had stopped and got some coffee on the way. And I was riding with just one hand on the handlebar and carrying coffee. And I hit a pothole. And that just upended everything. I got in a bad accident that broke my toe. I was banged up pretty good. I had a pretty big cut. And so I just hobbled into the station. I actually recorded a couple breaks before I called my supervisor at the time to ask him to come in and cover me. Luckily, we did have a classical music host at the time that was recording overnight. And he would be getting done with his recording of the afternoon classical music show when I showed up, and he was there to take me to the hospital, and I was really grateful for that. But just after that, I was on crutches, and so the custodians in the building would take me to work. They volunteered to do that. They didn't have to do that, and so I'm so grateful for that. And then my boss, Fred Martino, would take me home, and so it was something that I really appreciated, and I'm just so thankful for.
Well, tell me a little bit. Let's get back to those local stories from the border and the stories that are emanating out of this area. How did you learn how to tell those local stories effectively?
Well, I think it's just really spending time in communities. One thing about public media is that we have that time to put together a comprehensive story, to go to a community, meet the people, spend time with them, understand how the community works. In journalism and broadcast journalism, a lot of times you're on deadlines. And so you have to get somewhere, you have to file a story by the end of the day, and there's time constraints on that. But with the work we do, we actually have a little time to put the comprehensive story together that's longer than 90 seconds. It might be 4 to 5 minutes to where we're able to talk to everybody in a community. And so I think that's where you have to begin with public media journalism, is meeting the community where they are.
What are some of the stories that have had the biggest impact on you and that you will take with you?
Well, I will tell you recently, covering the Young Park shooting and just overseeing that coverage because it garnered a national audience. Going to that scene the Sunday after the shooting and seeing the impact as families mourned. You're a reporter, you have to do your job, but you're also a person. And I was raised in a community as a child that was plagued by gun violence. So this is something that I was very familiar with and have seen growing up at a young age. So seeing that brought back some memories for me of experiencing what it's like to be in a community that's plagued by gun violence on a regular basis. And so trying just to focus and do your job, but not be affected as a person that this is going on, it's really difficult, in those moments. Another story that I think really had a profound impact on me was doing some reporting on computer science in New Mexico. There was a push by educators in computer science at high schools across the state to get legislation through the New Mexico legislature to allow for students in high school to take computer science as an elective. And so it would provide more opportunities for students to learn this skill that a lot of jobs are going to be looking for in the future. And we're also looking at it not only as an educational opportunity, but an economic development opportunity. Now, that passed through the legislature at this time. This is probably 2016, 17, I would say, with broad support, both aisles, unanimously. But it was vetoed by the governor at the time, Susana Martinez. Now, at the time, she didn't explain why the veto was, so that caught my attention. And so I began digging and exploring into that, and I talked to these teachers who were teaching computer science across the state. I was looking at experts in the field, and I came across a small school in eastern New Mexico, Melrose, New Mexico, a small school that is one of those buildings that has the middle school and high school combined. Everybody's in the same building. But they had a teacher who was doing really well with the supercomputing team was the supercomputing team that was competing at state level against big schools and doing well. And they had even won the state championship. And what caught my eye was all these kids in Melrose that took part in this program ended up getting college scholarships. And going to Melrose, and as soon as I pulled up there, it was a weekday morning, the teacher, Alan Doherty, that I was there to talk to, they call him Mr. D, he pulled up in a bus and opened the door and said, "Hey, I'll be right back after I finish my bus route."
Wow.
So not only was this science teacher teaching science throughout the day, coaching, he was also staying after and teaching computer science to kids from 6th grade all the way to high school. He was also driving a bus route. And that was something that I thought that was just amazing. When you see that type of dedication, it really has a profound impact. I don't care who you are, a reporter or anything. And so being able to report on that and share that story, and also found other success stories with that supercomputing challenge. It was later shared by the supercomputing challenge at Los Alamos. And then what do you know? Not too long after that story published, the governor at the time, Susana Martinez, her administration, the Department of Education, announced that they were going to allow for students to be able to take computer science as an elective, and that whole process was going to start. And I don't have an update on where that is right now, but I can tell you that was one of those moments where you're just like, oh wow, you're able to shine light on an issue, and coincidentally, something changed.
That is a great example, I think, of something you said earlier about being able, when you work in public media, to take a little bit more time with a story, to really find these special things about it, right? But I wanted to talk a little bit more about working in public media and kind of the landscape that exists right now in public media around the country with threats to funding. Are you concerned about the future of public media?
Absolutely. As somebody who's a content director, I'm also in charge of programming. And so I know that if there's going to be public media funding cuts, that may also trickle down to making some tough decisions when it comes to programming. As somebody who has overseen a staff of around 10, I'm concerned that that may impact staffing down the road. And staffing has been a challenge no matter where you're at in journalism or broadcast journalism. There's always challenges with staffing, and that's only gotten worse over the years for a variety of reasons.
I wanted to touch a little bit on the state of journalism. If you could kind of give us an idea of how you think journalism is doing, fulfilling kind of its role as a bulwark of democracy, if you will?
Well, that's a broad question, first of all. So I think it's good to maybe look at a couple of things. First of all, journalism is evolving. The way we're sharing stories is evolving, and the way people are consuming the news is evolving as well. Now, when we were growing up, it might have been a little different. You know, there was only a certain number of channels available. A lot more people were reading newspapers, and the internet and social media, you know, wasn't as big and playing a role in news as it is today. And so we have a more on-demand audience that's consuming the news when they want to, not at a set time at 5:30 or at 10 o'clock every night. So that has changed, and with that is the need for news to evolve. How and where that's going to be, I mean, that's the question. But one thing that I am confident in is that everybody's always going to need their local news. They're going to need to stay informed on what the traffic situation is every morning, or the weather, or what's happening at their city council or their school board. These are things that people care about, and it impacts people directly a lot quicker than what might impact people, the decisions being made in Washington, D.C. So I think that's kind of like one of the other things. The other thing is I think our literacy with the news is evolving as well. I think the reporters that are coming up right now are very media savvy, and they understand that media literacy, the difference between opinion and news. What we've seen, the change in especially cable news, is there's a lot more opinion of the news instead of actual news. And that's could be for a variety of reasons. These are major companies and corporations. They have obligations to their stockholders. And so with public media, I think there's a really big opportunity to take advantage of that, because one, if you go to our website, krwg.org, there's no paywall. You can consume the news and read it as much as you want to, or you could watch the programs that we have here on PBS and KRWG Public Media or NPR as well, to stay updated with those news programs.
So I'd like to talk a little bit, you mentioned young journalists, and you know, you've mentored a few along the way here at KRWG. Mm-hmm. Tell me what that process is like, and mentoring a young journalist, what messages do you really want to pass on to them?
Well, I think the message is to just let them know that they can do this if they put the work in. It's a wonderful field that could provide a lot of opportunities. It certainly has for me. I had amazing mentors. This field allowed for me to be able to do so much, to not only work in radio, television, digital space. It allowed me to take advantage of fellowships that took me to Europe and to learn about news and media in Germany, and visit, you know, amazing places and make connections all across the globe. I've been able to report here in the Borderland region, and so there's a lot of unique opportunities with that as well. And just being able to work as a team, I think, you know, has been a great opportunity. But what I would say to up and coming journalists is that there's a lot of opportunities in this field still. And I think anybody that's willing to do the research, do the work, understand what it takes to tell a story the right way, I think people are always going to find success in it.
What has impressed you about the young people that are going through the program here at NMSU, coming into KRWG? You
know, this is something I really didn't expect to really enjoy so much when I first kind of started doing that and take on that role. But seeing the enthusiasm with the next generation on wanting to make a difference, I think the students that are graduating college right now have a strong community mindset than perhaps, you know, my generation. I'm not for sure on that. That's just from what I've seen. They really focus on communities and how they can make a difference. I've had the opportunity also to interview Las Cruces Mayor's top teens, and seeing those amazing students every year and what they're doing, it's just something that you really take a step back and you're like, wait a minute, I'm hearing all this doom and gloom in the world, but the future looks pretty good to me. So I think it's really their enthusiasm, how creative they are, and how they're really open to working together as a team. And that's something I think you really have to do in journalism to really make sure that you get a great product out there and news and information in the right way. It really takes a collaboration.
You mentioned the word collaboration. It was just on my mind because, you know, it looks like that's a model moving forward for journalism as well, as really working between different news outlets to create the right information that people need. Right?
And that's something I'm really proud of, being able to be part of so many collaborations with other newsrooms in our area over the last several years. When I first got here in 2012, I felt like there was a little competition between newsrooms in our area, but as we saw our peers start to lose their jobs, start to go into other fields because the salaries weren't competitive or there were no more opportunities here to grow or move out of the area, that's where you saw a lot of the collaborations take part, and being part of those collaborations really had an impact. The supercomputing story that I told you about was part of a collaboration through the Solutions Journalism Network and High Country News and newsrooms across New Mexico. It was called State of Change, and it focused on the resilience of New Mexicans. And when I think about New Mexico, when I think about the borderland community, that's a word that I really consider is resiliency.
Well, what's next for you, Anthony?
What is next for me is I'm moving to Austin, Texas to pursue new opportunities. I'm not quite sure what those opportunities are going to be right now, but I'm going to take a breath, explore my options, and find something that's just right for me right now.
In the meantime, just do your part to keep Austin weird.
Well, you know, that is the mantra, and I think there's a lot of people doing that. So whatever I do to help, yeah, that's great. But I'm really looking forward to exploring the culture. Austin has one-way flights back to Kansas City, where I'm from, so I'll be able to see my family a lot more, and that's something I'm really looking forward to.
All right, Anthony. Well, it's been a pleasure working with you over the last 5.5 years, and I really am so sorry to see you go. Please don't be a stranger. And thank you for being with us here on Newsmakers.
Thank you for this opportunity, Casey.
Yeah. And thank you for joining us for this week's episode. Remember, you can always keep updated with news at krwg.org, where you can sign up for our newsletter. I'm KC Counts, and we'll see you next time on Newsmakers.